Hello everybody and welcome to Vaidya's Chess Hub. In today's lecture, we are going to learn the classical variation of the Nimzo-Indian defense. In the last lecture, we had learned about the Zemist variation, the move A3 in the Nimzo-Indian, and we had also learned about the Budapest Gambit. So in today's video, I'm going to cover the classical variation, which is the 4 Queen C2 Nimzo-Indian, and I'm going to recommend you two moves against it. So depending on your test, you can choose either one of them. So let's jump into the topic. So d4, knight f6, c4, e6, and after the move knight c3, we can play the Nimzo-Indian, which is the move bishop to b4. Other than knight c3, there are two main moves in this position. One of them is knight f3, against which, as I have said in the earlier lecture, either you can play the Benoni or the Queen's Gambit decline or the Bogo-Indian. So we'll come to it later on which opening we want to play against knight f3, and there is also move g3 that you need to be prepared against. So these are the two alternatives, but currently we are focusing on the move knight to c3, and now again we have option. Now c5 is not supposed to be good in with the move knight to c3 as per the theory goes, and d5 you can of course play transposing to the Queen's Gambit decline, but we are more concerned with the move bishop to b4. And now Queen c2 is the classical variation of the Nimzo-Indian. As I have explained in the previous lecture, that the main moves in this position are f3, knight f3, e3, the Rubinstein system, a3, the Zemist variation, which we have already learned, Queen c2, classical variation, and Queen b3. So these are all the main lines in the Nimzo-Indian if white wants to play the Nimzo-Indian. And the good thing about this particular opening is after each of white's move, black has number of alternatives. He can play very concretely by playing something like c5 against reply, as or we have seen sometimes play b6 eventually and get this bishop out to a6 in many of the lines. This is the idea. Sometimes he might just castle. For instance, the move that we are going to look at today is the move queen to c2. Now it is important to understand the idea of this move first, because in the Nimzo-Indian you have to remember one thing, that the theory progresses every day. There are a number of games played in each of the variations, but it is more important to remember the idea. Now if you remember, in the move a3, white was immediately putting pressure on this bishop and asking black to show his cards immediately, and we were capturing this knight, and then we had seen a lot of moves at this point. As I have told you, there's b6 possible, there is knight e4, which is an interesting sideline. Like, some of these moves were possible, and white's intention was to build up the center with f3 and e4, and black's play was concerned with playing move like bishop a6 and get this bishop out, and then eventually putting pressure on this double pawns. So depending upon the choice that white makes in the opening, your strategy will vary accordingly. So for instance, the queen c2 move does not put the pressure on the bishop on b4, but then what is the idea of this move? Well, the idea of queen c2 is it serves basically two purposes. First of all, it controls the e4 square. So for instance, any other move that white can think of other than the main line, black might play knight e4 to put pressure on this pin and then create a double pawn. So first of all, queen c2 covers the square e4, and which is very important square in the Nimzo-Indian. If you will see this line, the battle often goes around the controlling the e4 square. So queen c2 does that. First of all, it increases the control over e4. Second thing is, if we ever take on c3, white is going to capture with his queen, and he doesn't have to stay with the doubled pawns in that case, because the queen on c3 would be nicely placed. And also, if black gives up this bishop, then these squares are in the black camp can become potentially weak, because white will have the advantage of two bishops as well. So these are the two purposes that the move queen c2 serves, basically controlling the e4 square and protecting the knight, avoiding the double pawns. So we are going to look at now. I will tell you the options that black has. Black has at least 4 good options here. So he has the classical move, which is the move castles, which is the main line. He has the move d5. He also has the move c5. The move d5 is I guess known as the classical Nova variation. There are many Carlsen Kramnik games in it. c5 move is also there. So these are the options: c5, d5, castles, and b6, and also there is the move knight c6. So in today's video I'm going to show you the lines with castles here, which is the most natural move, right? You just bring the knight out, you bring the bishop out, and now the next thing that you want to do is just to play castle. And so today I'm going to recommend you two moves. One of them is going to be castle. We will see some games in it which are notable games, and there are some interesting tactics as well in it. So castle is one of the moves, and the other move is knight to c6. Now this knight to c6 has a bit of a Chigorin defense flavor. So if you know, against the move d4 d5 queen's gambit, there is this move knight to c6, a bit unusual move. So I feel like in the queen c2 Nimzo, if you are playing this fourth move knight c6, see, it's very logical. White by moving his queen to c2 has abandoned the control of the d4 square, so d4 pawn is vulnerable and we attack it immediately with the move knight to c6. So it's a very logical move, and since white can't play d5 because it will be just captured twice, and because of this pin the knight can't be taken, so that's the straightforward move knight c6. So you can choose in between castles or knight c6. So we are going to start with the game of Lubuevitch versus Kramnik. Now Vladimir Kramnik is the one who, again, you should study a lot in this line. There are three names basically: Vladimir Kramnik, Anatoly Karpov, and Peter Leko. These three names you have to remember if you want to prepare the Nimzo-Indian, and you have to watch their games. So today I think there are about 2 to 3 games of Vladimir Kramnik. So this was a rapid game between Lubuevitch and Kramnik. Kramnik is playing with the black pieces, of course, and you will see how Kramnik's knights do the magic when he plays the Nimzo-Indian. So queen c2 castle, this was the main line, and now white plays the move a3. Now white says that since I have protected my knight on c3, now I have time to challenge this bishop on b4. And after this is the main line. Now it doesn't make any sense to go back, because then white will get huge positional advantage on the queen side here because of this pawns, and usually this is not why we play the Nimzo-Indian if we want to retreat. So black exchanges, and now of course he doesn't want to take with the b pawn, creating a double pawn, so he takes with the queen. And now the move b6. Now also there is a move d5, as we will see later in the game. In this game b6 was played by Kramnik. Bishop to g5, immediately putting the pressure on this pin, and now white wants to go e4 e5 to enhance this pressure. So black goes bishop b7, immediately controlling the e4 square, stopping him from playing the pawn move to e4. White says that I am going to play e4 anyway, so plays f3 in order to get in e4. Now black challenges this bishop immediately with the move h6, bishop h4, and now d5. Again the d5 move is stopping the e4, so it's all the fight for the e4 square. And now white decides that he just wants to play e3, and eventually he will try to play e4 later in the middle game. So there is also an interesting plan with the move e3, that sometimes white wants to go like knight g3, and it's not usually connected with the move f3, but there is a plan of going knight e2 knight g3, which again will prepare the move e4. So after e3, Kramnik develops normally with the move knight bd7. So white seizes this chance of isolating the pawn on d5. So cd5 was played, and here actually there is a nice theoretical line that was played in this game. Knight takes d5 is possible, getting out of this pin and solving the problem at once, because the knight is counter attacking the queen. So this forcing line was played. Bishop takes d8, knight takes c3, and in the game bishop to h4 was played. If you continue this cycle of pawn grabbing, it will go very tactical, like bishop takes c7. Now since our knight is under attack, we move it back, attack the bishop. Now bishop is attacking the rook, so knight takes e3 is actually interesting move. So we could just move the rook, but instead of that we can play knight take e3, gaining back the pawn that we had sacrificed. And after bishop takes f8, there is knight c2 check, and then we can just take his rook, and then we have equalized the position here comfortably. So this is how the theory goes after this nice move knight takes d5, bishop takes d8, knight takes c3. Now in the game bishop h4 was played by Lubuevitch, and now Kramnik anyway has to protect his knight, so knight moves back, and now bishop to f2. And after bishop to f2, he is overprotecting this pawn on d4, so that whenever pawn goes to e4, this d4 pawn will have some support. So bishop goes to f2, and after c5, white plays the move bishop to b5. and knight f5 to f6. So as you can see from the opening, white doesn't really have achieved anything substantial from the opening point of view. And now Kramnik is the one against whom, if you don't get any opening advantage, then the playing the equal endgame against this player is especially very difficult, because he is able to push his opponents to such a limit, whether he knows that he knows how much to squeeze each position. Basically, he has the concrete idea about the end game and a very nice feel for his pieces as well. So he knows how much he can press in a particular end game. And when you are in such a equal end game against someone like Vladimir Kramnik, you should make sure that you are going to make a draw forcefully, otherwise you might suffer for a very long time. And as we can see in this game, it was difficult for Lubuevitch to continue playing accurately. So bishop a4 b5 was played by Kramnik, gaining some space on the queen side. Bishop to c2, and now c takes d4, knight takes d4, and rook to c8. And now you can see, once you have got a normal position out of the Nimzo-Indian, your rooks are quite nice here. This bishop might come into play later on, and also our knights are very wonderfully placed. This knight is potentially heading to the c4 square, from where it can put pressure on this two targets that are there in the position. And also, if you see, black's position is pretty healthy. His rooks are going to get the semi-open file, and he's just totally fine. So white castle long here. G6 was played. Now E4 finally from white, getting this strong pawn chain. Usually a good idea to get it against this bishop, which is not that good now. So rook to c7, a simple plan by Vladimir Kramnik just to double the rooks. So king b1, rook f c8. And now after rook c1, he plays the move knight h5. Now knight h5 is clearly aimed at the square on f4, and there can be some ideas of playing e5 and then knight e2 potentially, and also to just create the pressure among this at this pawn chain. This move knight h5 was played. So bishop e3, stopping knight f4, and now king to h7. Now I'm not exactly sure about the purpose of this move. Sometimes you want to play it because then the exchanges will not happen with check, and there can be some intermediate move. But Kramnik is more or less just passing on the move here to white. So g4 was played, and now knight comes back, h4, and now e5. Now white, I think, has got some initiative here because of these pawns that can potentially come ahead. So knight to b3 was played, and now here the tactical operation starts. Kramnik finds a nice trick. Knight takes g4, and now I think you can pause the video to figure out what was in. So in the game, bishop to d2 was played, but what was Kramnik's intention after the move f takes g4? I think you can pause the video and have a think. What will Kramnik do after this capture? Yeah, so his point was, this is a typical idea. I guess I have also explained it in my Taimano lecture, to isolate this pawn on e4. This is a typical tactic. So knight takes g4. If f takes g4, there would have followed rook takes c2. And after rook takes c2, just capturing the rook at once. And after king takes c2, bishop take e4, it's a bishop fork. And black wins a pawn here and has a winning endgame. So that's the reason, after this nice tactic, knight takes g4, Lubuevitch just retreated the bishop, and now Kramnik is just pawn up in this position, and his technique was perfect as usual, and he keeps this tactic this tactic keeps on repeating. So rook takes c2 was played here, rook takes c2, and now after rook takes c2, king takes c2, again knight takes e4. So this tricky knight has captured both these pawns which were dominating this bishop, and now the pawn structure has just disappeared from this king side, and now it can't be taken because of course the bishop fork that will again leave black with two pawns up. So rook d1 was played, but now knight simply comes back, and now in this position, even though black is an exchange up, he has two pawns for the exchange, and also this pawn on f3 is weak, this pawn is weak. So with the Kramnik's technique, he converts it nicely. One more thing to notice is that Kramnik's knights are always wonderful in this Nimzo-Indian. We will see in one other game that these knights, when they have good post, they can dominate the rook as well. So here the fork was threatened, so rook to e1 was played, f5, setting the majority to work. So bishop to c3, f4, and now knight e4 was played. Now this move f4 is aimed at getting this square, so you can't take on e5 here, because knight e3 check is the intermediate move, and then we can just take the bishop. So that's the point of the move f4, tactically saving the pawn on e5. So knight e4 was played. Now knight e3 anyways. One thing is definite here, that minor pieces need good squares, and knight on e3 is just fantastic here. So and after king d3 he just give up his bishop as well, because his knights are enough here to do the job. So knight c5 was played. The pawn can't be taken because of knight d3 4. It was anyways taken, because otherwise yeah, the king almost is in mating net. There is no move actually, so can't come to f5, can't go back to d3. So this knight c5 is actually forcing the king to take the pawn, and then knight d3, and then the rook was lost as well. And now this knight versus bishop endgame is pretty easily winning for Kramnik. So g5 was played. It's considering it is a rapid game. Actually white could have some drawing chances here as well, but considering it was a rapid game and you're playing against Kramnik, it's not a good news. So Kramnik centralizes his king first, and then exchanges the pawn, and then his target is to focus on this pawn on f3, and he sends the king away first, and then eventually wins that pawn. So the plan is going to be simple. You want to create a breakthrough here. So since this pawn disappeared, now these two pawns are just unstoppable. So the game continued like a5, f3, bishop to e1, knight to d3, and now bishop to f2 was played. Knight takes f2. White was hoping that this pawn would create enough counterplay, but Kramnik had calculated that after this promotion, both the pawns promote, and this skewer does not work because there is simply knight f6 and the queen is still safe. So he had to calculate that, and after a couple of more moves, I think at this point Lubuevitch decided to resign, because just to show the line, at some point white will run out of checks. So this is the possible variation when black just has extra knight and a pawn, and it's lost position. So you can see how easily Kramnik first of all equalized. So our concern is the opening. So let's go back to the opening. So in the queen c2 Nimzo, we are castling here. So this is the line that I'm recommending you. And after a3 we exchange, and then we play the move b6. Now this is one of the ways to continue. And in this game he equalized quite comfortably. One thing to remember is the fight for this e4 square. It's quite crucial, because if white gets in e4 e5, then things are pretty nasty for black. But you need to know how to neutralize it precisely with the moves like this. So h6 first, and then d5. H6 is also long term very useful, just giving a room for the king. So it's anyways a useful move. And then once Kramnik had an equal position, this tactical resource is also important, which leads to simplification and having black a very comfortable position. And this move is also very important, this move c5, because if you allow white to create pressure on the c file pawn by creating some more targets, and if white gets eventually e4, then black will be again in some trouble. So this c5 move at once just solves the backward pawn problems, and then black is immediately comfortable. Okay, so this was a game of Lubuevitch versus Kramnik, which featured the move after the move castle a3, bishop takes c3, queen takes c3, the move b6, and we have seen the ideas in it. Now let's go to the next game. Okay, now in this game, this is another game of in the Russian team championship. So d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4, queen c2. Again, this is the classical variation of the queens of the Nimzo-Indian. Castle was played here, and this is all familiar. Now I hope you remember, white plays a3, bishop takes c3, queen takes c3, and in the last game Kramnik had played the move b6, but there is alternative that you can try as well, the move d5. And the point is, after in this position white decided to play cd5, and black had this intermediate move knight e4, queen b3, e takes d5. The point of queen c2 Nimzo is also that this, if black doesn't get the c5 move at right time, then if it manages to double on the c file, then if the queen can take on c7, it's usually a better endgame for white. So it's very important to be accurate in this system, and black immediately played the move c5, striking in the center, and after d takes c5, This is, I guess, the game of Sugiro. Yeah, this is the game of Sun and Sugiro with the black pieces. One of the top Russian grandmasters, and he played the move knight a6. See, it's about the knights as well in the Nimzo-Indian. And if you can see, white has broken one of the basic opening principle, which is he's not castling, so his king is still in the center. So this is the wonderful example of the exploitation of the king, which is still in the center. So after knight a takes c5, queen to d1, black played bishop d7, and he can already look at this sensitive squares along the white camp. Because the pawn is on a3, this bishop appeared on a4 on the next move, and now you can see that he is creating some threats with his knights and bishops here early in the opening. So queen to f3 was played, and now knight b3, knight take b3, bishop take b3, and now bishop to d3 was played finally with the aim to castle. Queen a5 check, although stopping white from castling. So king e2 was played. If king f1, then there is the move rook f to c8, and it creates a very concrete threat. So I think you can pause the video and figure out what is the threat in the position. Let's say white plays something like g3 in order to run away with his king. What threat black has created here in the position? The move rook f to c8 was made with a very specific intention. The point is, we are stopping the king from castling, because if let's say you play a move like g3, there will follow rook takes c1 check. This is the point of black's play, and after rook takes c1, there is knight d2, which is a fork, and black will win. So that is the point. After queen a5 check, king e2 was played in the game. After king f1, rook f c8, bishop takes e4, there is the move bishop c4 check, and after this, of course, there's queen e1 mate. So this is a nice intermediate check once again that wins the game for black. So this is the point of the move rook f c8. It creates enormous pressure. So that's the reason in the game, after queen a5 check, king to e2 was played, but it doesn't really change anything. Rook a to c8 was played, and after queen f5 in this position, bishop c2 was played, and white just resigned here. The reason is pretty simple. If you decide to exchange, it's going to be a check. The pawn on f2 is falling. If the king goes to f3, at the least after king f3, rook f2, it will be just over. And also with after something like this, you can take the pawn on f2 with the knight. You can't take with the knight because the rook is hanging maybe, but you can take it with the rook quite simply, and anyways it's a winning position. For instance, after this, you can't even take the pawn on d5 because there is rook d8, and that will pick up the queen. There can be some stronger checkmate patterns as well, but this is at the minimum, this is possible, and black is completely winning. So I think this short game was actually a nice illustration of the fact that if when white is playing this move queen c2, he is in fact not committed where he's going to put his king, and you can take quite early advantage of this move. And this game clearly shows that this particular knight regroupment of not regroupment, I will say the placement of knight by Sugiro was quite interesting. So knight e4, immediately gaining the tempo, and after queen b3, breaking with c5, and then recapturing. See, one thing is pretty clear in Nimzo-Indian. You should not be aiming to equalize the material on the spot. Rather, your pieces should have good squares. So after c5, dc5, you can see he's not concerned taking this pawn immediately, like, because it will break the rule, right? Moving the same piece twice in the opening, he doesn't want to do that. There is another knight that he can come that can come into the game with the consequent development of the bishop. So this knight on e4 is a wonderful piece, so he doesn't want to move it, and this pawn can hardly be protected. If white decides to put his pieces unusually in defending just this pawn, then he is going to have problems with his king. And usually black's play is going to be simple. He's just going to bring this bishop out either to e6 or to f5, play rook c8, and if white obviously can't castle long here, that would be just too dangerous because his pawn structure is just damaged here. So that's the simple plan that black employed here by just playing knight a6, knight c5, and this bishop d7, bishop a4 was a nice maneuver. And then after simple exchanges and the move queen to f5 check, white is already losing in this position. As we saw after king f1, he has rook fc8, and then there are just so many tricks with this. The basic thing to see is that these rooks are not in play while black's rooks are in play. So simply black has a huge advantage here. So this was a quick win for Sanan Sugero in the system. Just to revise it once. After I'll directly jump to this position. So we have seen b6 by Kramnik, d5 by Sugero. So let's go to the next game. Now this is another game of Morozevich versus Kramnik in the Nimzo-Indian. So let's go through this game. Yeah, this one was a big game. So let's see. D4. This was from Tal Memorial in 2009, and let's see what happened in this game. D4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4, queen c2, castle a3. These are all main line. This is how it's supposed to continue. By the way, white can play something like knight f3 in this position, or e3, and continue normally, but a3 is the real test of this system. It's very difficult to cover Nimzo-Indian, like even the single variation in just a 1 hour lecture, because there are so many ideas that white has in even such a simple position. He has number of moves, like f3 is the move, e3 is the move. Sometimes there are crazy ideas with the move g4 as well, that white trying to go immediately after the king, since the king has been committed already to this square. So I have decided to collect maximum games with some nice tricks. So I'm not just going into the detail of one game, because I want you to have more examples from where you can learn it slowly. So a3, bishop c3, queen c3, the main line. Now b6 was played. Now in this game d5 was played, and after cd5 in the last game we saw knight e4 followed by ed5. So in this game knight f3 was played, and that's the reason I have selected these games. It's the simple system, what to play if white plays quite simply with knight f3. So in the game Kramnik, this is Morozevich versus Kramnik. So Kramnik decided to take on c4, queen c4, and play the move b6. If you saw the treatment that Vladimir Kramnik played this Nimzo-Indian with, he applied the same way. Now this bishop might as well jump to a6 in this particular case. So after bishop to a4, bishop to a6 was played, and this is typical idea in many of the Benko gambit positions, where black makes it difficult for white to push the move e3, because then the bishop on f1 would be captured and the king will lose the castling rights. So this bishop is quite nicely placed on a6. And now you can see this is a pawn sacrifice, but there is a long theory here, that after queen takes c7, black plays the move queen to d5, and sometimes he creates the threat of rook f to c8. So after e3 you exchange on f1, and then you play knight c6, and then the theory continues like this. So queen d6, and this is how the grandmasters sometimes make draw. After knight d4 and queen takes b2, this is a famous game between grandmasters, and after rook a c8, actually black is better even in this position. So that is the reason sometimes after queen d6, very often players make draw in such positions by repeating the moves in this fashion. After knight e4, they can even come back, and then the moves are repeated. There is a grandmaster draw here. I have not put the line here, but yeah, there is possibility of an early draw. So yeah, this is the theory that taking on c7 pawn is actually not a good way to continue, because this is at the least the precise way. This queen d5 move you have to remember with some threats, and then yeah, basically white can escape with a draw. Like this is the draw, I think, that is there. After rook c8, queen d6, white gives a check, and then the queen sometimes comes back to b4, and then queen d5, and then queen d6. This is how I think the drawing line is. But anyways, this queen d5 move is important to remember. So queen c2 was played in the game. After, let's just go back once again, b6, bishop f4, bishop a6, queen c2 was played. And after this, Vladimir Kramnik just decided to develop normally with the move knight bd7. He just wants to play c5 next move, as we have seen, which will just take away the pressure from this. After bishop takes c7, you can just play the move queen to c8. Then there is this knight coming to d5 that is going to enhance the pressure on this pin, and black is totally fine here. So this is the point of pawn sacrifice. He can't take on c7 in this case as well. So bishop takes f1, e4 was played in the game after knight bd7, and now black breaks the castling right of white by capturing this and playing c5, which was the idea. Now white goes for the move bishop d6, rook to e8, e5 and knight d5. By the way, one thing you have to remember, if you go to opening explorer and put this position, you might think that these all moves have been calculated by players. No, this is not over the board calculation yet. Both the players are still in theory. But this is one of the things actually that I like about the Nimzo-Indian, is that the way the theory has developed is quite natural. Like if you look at each of black's move, it's quite natural what he's doing. He's developing the knight out on the first move, bishop out on the second move, castling on the third move, on the fourth move, that is, and he's putting his pieces quite normally. He wants to get rid of this backward pawn on c7. So the strategy is very concrete, and that's the reason players are able to dig deeper into this opening lines, and they are able to prepare in quite a depth. So in this game, Morozevich decided to play h4. If he had captured on c5, then knight takes c5 would have followed, and after bishop takes c5, you could include rook c8 here as well, which is a possibility, but even taking and then rook b8 is quite nice. Once again, you can see this is typical of the Benko gambit, or yeah, basically Benko gambit positions, where the white extra pawn on the queen side is not really a big factor, since black's pieces are too active here, and he has some plans of immediately creating play here with his rooks as well. And this rook on h1 is out of picture, which is the important thing. See, whenever you want to evaluate a position, you should look at the active pieces that both sides have, and this rook on h1 is simply not an active piece, so we don't count that while we count the material. So in the game, h4 was played, trying to go for an attack here with the move knight to g5 and then create some threats along this diagonal. Since white has this obvious advantage, he wants to do that. So Kramnik responded with c takes d4, and after knight g5, he played the move, fantastic move, f5. We have seen one of the game of Kramnik against, I think it was against Boris Gelfand, where he had played the similar idea. The point is, after ef6, he will just capture with this knight, attacking the bishop, and this construction in the center along with the center pawn is just too solid for black. And after something like bishop e5, his rooks immediately get the play. That's the point in Nimzo-Indian. So black is totally fine here. So in the game, after knight g5, f5, queen to c4 was played, with sometimes the tactic of knight e6, rook e6 and queen d5. So queen to c8 was played in this position, and let's say if you play the move like h6 instead of queen c8, then there will follow knight takes e6 and then queen takes d5, uh, which is, I think, probably equal, but yeah, that is a tactic possible. So Kramnik is not the guy who allows such tactics. He just went queen c8, attacking the queen. He will be happy with the exchange of queens here, of course, because this central pawns then would be fine. So queen takes d4 was played in the game, and now knight c5. And in this position, Morozevich made the mistake by playing the move rook to d1. And now it's a little bit of advanced exercise, but black has a nice move here that gives him immediately the advantage. I will say that you can pause the video and think what will you play from black here that guarantees him the nice position out of the opening. I think this is little tricky, not so obvious, but it's a good move in this position. You can have a think over this one, black to play. Okay, black played the fantastic move that was played in the game, by the way, by Kramnik, knight to b3. And now suddenly you will see that this queen doesn't have a lot of squares. So if you look at the squares that the queen has, it has only 2 squares. So in the game, queen to d3 was played. If queen a4 is played, then there follows queen to c2, hitting the rook, threatening a checkmate. And after rook e1, black wins with quite a simple tactic. Again, you can pause and find out. This one is easy. This can be solved actually by all of you. A simple discovered attack that wins the queen. So knight d2 check, and the queen is lost. So if you see, in fact, after this move knight to b3, the queen is suddenly in trouble. So queen d3 was played, and now Kramnik continues attacking this queen with the move knight to c1. Now if you go queen to d2, then there will follow queen c4 check and then knight e2 check, and now you can see that white is not so happy with this king. Like, he of course doesn't want to go to f1. Going to h2 is also not a good news, since the pawn on h4 would fall. So for example, he goes to f4, we at the least have knight e to c3 check and grabbing this rook, and then rook a to c8 will exchange the queens, and we'll be quite happy here with black, since we are exchange up. So after knight to c1, in fact queen to b5 was played in the game, and now queen to c2, immediately going for the attack. Look at this white king on f1, so queen take d1 is again a mate threat. So white decides to be desperate here and plays the move rook takes d5, and now of course it will be a big blunder to take on d5. So has Kramnik blundered this? Because if e takes d5, then you know this usual pattern, queen takes d5 and it would be checkmate. So king to h8 is the only move even in this case, because the f8 square is also covered, and now it's a typical smothered mate that we already know. Knight f7, king g8, knight h6. I don't think there is any need of explanation. There is a whole video recorded on this topic. So queen g8 and then knight f7 is a nice checkmate. So has Kramnik blundered this rook takes d5? Of course not. He finds the move a6, distracting the queen first. So queen takes on b6. Now even plays the move queen to c4 check, and after king g1 plays the calm move e takes d5. And now after this you can see that he's threatening some checks here, like knight e2 check is a threat. So g3 was played, h6 kicking this knight away, because there can be some tactics later on with this if the queen appears on f7 or somewhere. So he just decides to move this knight away, and then after knight f3 plays f4, a very strong move. So the point is that after g takes f4, knight e2 check would follow, and then king g2, knight takes f4. Basically the knight will get a nice target on f4, and then he will continue the attack. And after king h2, there is actually a nice move that will bring the queen into the attack. I think you can pause the video and figure out how you can bring the queen into attack here. Yes, you can play the move queen to c8, and now this queen is moving towards this side and is going to cause the maximum damage. And after something like queen g3, you can just play king f5, and then the attack is just going to continue here with something like knight h5, queen f4 check is possible, and the rooks are also going to come into play, maybe even via e6 to g6 as well, and black's pieces are just too strong here. So after f4, of course white also doesn't want to weaken his structure in general, so g4 was played, queen e4 and king g2, knight d3, and after queen b3, queen c4, couple more moves. Now once you can see that white's initiative, once it has been gone, black has a nice control with his pawns and pieces in the center. So queen to b7 was played, and now Kramnik finds a nice tactic, knight takes f2, king takes f2, queen c2 check, and now he has calculated that he is going to win back that knight by force. So here in fact decided to give away the rook after king f2. After king g2, I think there would have simply been followed queen e2 check, and it would have been all over, because this knight would fall, and with that the pawn on g4 would also fall, and the pawn on f3 coming, it would be mate quite soon. So in the game, after king f2, queen takes h1, e6 was tried in order to get some activity for his pieces. Also there is queen f7 check threatened, so rook c8 was played, ignoring this check, because Kramnik has seen that there is no threat. And now bishop to c5, a creative way to block this c file, because rook takes c5 would be met with rook takes e8, queen takes e8, that's the point. But Kramnik simply plays the move queen c1, b4, cementing the bishop. But now queen c2 check, king g1 and queen e2, and now you can see this knight lacks the protection, so knight was moved to d4. But now once the knight moves, the g4 pawn is falling, and the rest was easy for Kramnik. He just picked up all the pawns, even played the move f3, because after king takes f3, he had seen that there is a rook f8, and after bishop takes f8, there is a rook c3 check. And now here Morozevich resigned, because there is a well-known pattern that will follow: king to g2, queen g3 check, king f1, rook c1 check, and you already know the name of this pattern, rook e1, king d2, and this mate is known as the railroad mate, leading to the kill box mate. So and this example is a nice one, where the game from the Nimzo-Indian, which finished in a railroad mate, another illustration of this, because it's not so easy to spot this idea of giving away the rook for free, but the point is just to activate the major pieces to the maximum, and basically the rook and queen are enough to checkmate. So this move rook f8 was a nice move that was played by Vladimir Kramnik, and this railroad mate in the end was a spectacular one. So yeah, this was a nice game by Kramnik in the this system. So let's go to the next game. Now this is another quick game by Kramnik again with the black pieces, and in this time the opponent is okay, I will tell it in the end. This was just a 20 move game, and Kramnik is playing with the black pieces, and it was a blindfolded game. And let's go through the game. And the player playing with the white played very aggressively here. So knight c3, bishop b4, queen c2, castle. Now instead of playing the move a6, a3, you would say why not e4? So natural move, right? Now Kramnik shows us how to tackle this move. He plays d6, and now this particular formation can usually lead to the hedgehog position. So you need to know this middle game concept known as the hedgehog. If you go to the Sicilian Scheveningen variations or the Najdorfs, there are sometimes lines where black just plays e6, and then that would result in a hedgehog positions. So in this game, bishop d3, knight c6, again you can see immediately putting pressure on d5. So knight e2 was played, bishop a5, and now this is a typical regroupment in order to pressurize the pawn on d4. So castle, bishop b6, d5, and now knight b4. And whenever black gets in this move, black is usually quite happy because he gets rid of one of the attacking pieces. And in the game, ed5, cd5, and knight g4 was played. Even though it's a Nimzo-Indian, it looks like quite an attacking opening. This f2 pawn is going to come under fire soon. After the move bishop to b1, queen h4 was played. Because if you play something like h3, then there would follow knight e5 again, attacking this bishop twice. And after bishop b1, there is a nice trick that black has actually. You can pause the video and figure out what trick black has in this position. I can give you a hint. It is based on the knight fork. Yes, black has the move bishop takes h3 here, snatching a pawn. The point is, of course, g takes h3 would be met with knight f3 with a nice knight fork that will win the queen. So in the game, bishop to b1 was played, and now queen h4. And now you can see immediately black's pieces are creating enough pressure. Actually, there is a mate in one threat here, which is more important, but which hopefully the white player would see. So he defended it with the move queen f4. Now if you play something like h3, then there is just knight f2, and which will win on the spot. After rook f2, queen f2, and king h2, there is even a nice move, nice idea. Again, I will ask you to pause the video. There is a very nice idea here based on the Greco's mate. I can give you one more hint. Black really has a nice move. When I was analyzing this game, I found this move to be really the beautiful one. One thing whenever we look at these classical games is that the moves and the ideas that are produced in them are so unique in nature. Like in this one, the move that black has at this point is bishop to g4. Such a fantastic move that just gives away the bishop. The point is, of course, h takes g4 would be the Greco's mate with the move queen to h4 checkmate. And when you see this moves being recommended by the computer, or when you find it in an analysis, it's the idea of these moves is it's quite fascinating, because this move bishop g4 is not like a cheap trick that just creates this mate in one threat, but the idea is just to go bishop f3 and target this pawn on g2. So if you think a normal person would never think in this way, that you can reach to the pawn on g2, because that's the of course target we have. This bishop g4 is just nice way to get to this pawn on g2 using the tactical resources that are there. So in the game, after queen h4, queen f4 was played, and f5 again. Kramnik is such of his style is so forcing, and that's why he's also one of my favorite players, because f5 is again just targeting the queen, opening up the position to the maximum. Now of course bishop takes f5 is not possible because of rook takes f5, and the queen can't take the rook because there is a mate. So queen to g3 would follow, and then there is a simple way to win, just rook takes f2, and then black is just breaking through in the position. His next rook is also coming to the game if needed, and just the activity of black pieces tells the position, tells the result of the position basically. So in the game after this h3 was tried, but now bishop takes f2, king h1, and now simple move bishop d7 attacking the queen, and after queen to g5, bishop to c5 was played, an elegant move sacrificing the queen because there is a mate threat. Rook take f1 is a mate threat. For instance, if you take the queen, there would follow rook takes f1 check, knight g1, rook take g1, simple checkmate. Also after rook takes f1 you can't go here because of the knight, so knight is still on g4. So after bishop c5, rook takes f8, rook takes f8, and knight g1 was tried by the white player, and now simple move rook f1 again, sacrificing the queen again because there is rook take g1 mate threat. His opponent tried the last trick, bishop takes h7 check, hoping that after king takes h7, queen takes h4 would be check. So don't take this bishop, but just king h8 is fine here, and then yeah, black just wins here quite easily because there are no checks. Rook takes g1 is unstoppable checkmate, and yeah, he decided to resign at this point. If you move the bishop, I think I can just take the rook as well in this position, so that's not a problem either. So yeah, in just black has the completely winning position. Also I think there is yeah, if you go something like a bishop to d2, I think this is the move that I haven't analyzed, but yeah, you can take the rook at the minimum, at the least. Knight f2 I don't think leads anywhere, so knight f2 is a possibility, but I don't think it's needed. You can just simply take the rook, because since he can't take the queen anyway, because rook take g1 is still a checkmate, and you also don't have this check because it's also x-rayed by this queen. The d8 square is under control, so you don't even have this check. So yeah, this the final position is completely winning, and now this game was actually only of 20 moves. After king h8, white resigned, and if I tell you the name of the white player, he is the current world champion Magnus Carlsen, and Magnus Carlsen lost in, even though it was a blindfold game, still and it was also old game, and Kramnik was really at the top of his form at that point. This was played in 2009, but Magnus was of course also strong at that point, and if Magnus can lose in just 20 moves with the white pieces, you can imagine the strength of this opening and the reason it is played by all the top players. So yeah, this was the game where Magnus went for a sideline here after the move castles. Instead of going for this a3, he decided to go just for e4, and Kramnik responded quite nicely, targeting the pawn on d4 in the opening, and then simply exchanging and immediately going for attack. So this unusual piece placement of white allowed such kind of attack, because if you look at the queen on d2 is not so naturally placed because it blocks the bishop. These knights don't have actually idea what they are going to do because they are not doing anything, and when the pieces are awkwardly placed, you normally have a good attack, and he just created a nice attack here with the move f5, again nice move. So yeah, this was I think one more nice game in this line where white employed this e4 idea early in the opening, just going for the center, complete center, but which was quite nicely neutralized by Kramnik. So let's go to the next game now. So this is the game of Edward Cole playing with the black pieces. You already know who is Cole is. I had mentioned about the Cole system for white side. So this is another old game, and now one thing is the flow in this game is just superb. The black pieces come out quite naturally. So let's look at the opening. It's the usual Nimzo-Indian, and now here instead of castling, black plays the move b6. So this is the third move actually that I am going to cover here. This is just to give another move. So we have seen castles. Now this time b6, e4, bishop b7, again threatening the pawn on e4. So bishop d3 was played, c5, breaking the center here with c5. So d5 is of course the natural response. Now the modern theory considers the move b5 as well here, which does the job of isolating this pawn on d5. So this is also one of the ways to play, but this is the game from 1925, so at that time the theory was not developed. So d6 was played, and after f4, ed5, ed5, castle. So you can see black is playing quite simply, exchanging in the center and then just castling, bringing his rook to the giving his rook an open file, rook e8, bishop e2, and knight a6. And this knight, as we know, jumps to b4. So castle knight b4 was played, and after queen d1, knight e4. So he's just going on exchanges along the e file. So you can see he has the control of e file. He just doubles his pieces on e file. Now, of course, ab4 would be made with rook e2. That's his point. So bishop to g4 was played, rook to d4, and now black seizes initiative immediately, attacking the queen. And after bishop d2, knight d3. And when this knight arrives at d3, it's known as the octopus knight. It's not supported by a pawn here, but it just targets at the lot of like it controls the rooks first of all, and the knight is just tremendous on that d3 square. When it's protected by pawn, I think it's known as octopus knight. So b3 was played here, defending the pawn, and now b5, immediately creating a counterplay. Queen c2 was played, bc4, bc4, and now queen e4, threatening to capture the pawn on c4. So rook to f3 was played, and now in this position, black found a nice tactic. You can pause the video and figure out what black had in mind. It's a positional trick, so it's a nice way to get your pieces into perfect position. Black found this nice trick, knight f2, and now in the game queen b2 was played, but if queen takes e4, then knight takes e4 would follow, and now there is a double threat of capturing this pawn as well as capturing this bishop. So after something like bishop e1, you would just take on c4, and now once this pawn disappears, this pawn is also going to disappear soon, and black is just left with two central pawns and plus active pieces. So that's why I said it's a positional trick that will just give black huge positional advantage. So after knight f2, queen b2 was played in the game, but now there followed another nice tactics, rook takes d2, and the point is this knight, this bishop is there that can be captured in this position, but our bishop on b7 is hanging. So black played rook takes d2, queen takes b7. So the point is, of course, that after queen takes d2 here, knight takes g4 is just a piece up, and then black has bishop and knight for the rook with great position as well. So this knight on g4 is tremendous, as well as white's rook are not really doing anything, and this pawn can be targeted as well later with the move bishop a6. So black has the advantage here. So queen takes b7, rook e8 was played, and now after rook takes f2, queen d4, white just resigned here. The point is, if you protect this rook, then there follows rook takes f2 and rook e1, a nice checkmate. So this was another example of the game that even the black plays quite primitively. Like in this setup, he just played the move b6. He did not even castle and still got a comfortable position out of the opening by following some of the general rules, like to bring the rook in the center and then just getting a good pieces for your square, then going for this control over the e file and slowly getting the pieces in, and managed to isolate the pawn on c4 and then targeted it, and with some nice tactics he managed to win the position. So this was another idea in the Nimzo-Indian. Now let us look at some other game in this system. Let's look at one game where knight to c6 move is featured. So let's see that game. So this one is let me see, what move is this, what game is this one. Yeah, this was another nice game actually. We'll go through it because it covers another normal idea in the Nimzo-Indian. So d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4, queen c2, castles, and now we have seen the move e4 here by Carlsen. We have seen the move a3 here, and now the third move is e3. What if white decides to continue normally? Black grabs the initiative immediately, playing c5 in the center, and after dc5 we know that we are not in a hurry to capture this pawn. We just play knight a6, targeting it even further, and after knight g2, in order to capture this knight with knight, then knight takes c5, a3. This exchange is followed, and then d5, immediately gaining a center control with the pawn. So b4 was played in the game, and now knight retreats, cd5, ed5, bishop to b2, knight b6, aiming for this square on c4. Rook to d1 was played, queen e7. Now white is offering a pawn here, No, it's sorry, it's actually protected twice. So knight d5 is not a problem yet. Bishop e2 was played and bishop to e6. So this is a typical isolated pawn position where white is going to target this pawn a number of times. He will just castle, play rook d2, rook d1 and try to put pressure here. So castle was played and black is hoping for this semi-open c file that is there in the position. So white steps out of this pin because there can be some tactics over this this file. So knight c4 hitting the important bishop. So knight b5 was played, a6, knight d4, b5 cementing this good knight on c4, and now knight b3 trying to come to this c5 square. Black decides to put his another knight into e4. So this both these knights are looking quite nice here. So queen a1 was played targeting the pawn on g7, and now here black goes for a nice attack. He plays the move queen to g5, a nice move that prepares the ideas like bishop to h3. So in the game bishop d4 was played. If you play something like g3, then there is actually a tactical idea like knight takes e3 is interesting here, because after fe3 queen e3, the bishop is hanging and you can't play rook f2 because there will be queen f2. So this is an idea that is possible there, which looks quite enticing at first, but after knight e3 there is bishop c1 and then the things are not so clear. So g3 is already questionable here because knight takes e3 is certainly fine for black, but there can be some other good moves as well, like bishop h3 for instance, just hitting the rook, and then there is definitely knight f2 because this time it's just mate after queen takes e3. So this typical isolated pawn ideas are there when the knight is on e4. So in the game bishop d4 was played, bishop to h3, bishop f3, just defending the mate threat on g2, and now a nice rook lift in the game occurred, rook c6, just swinging across the rook to the other side and just destroying this pawn structure. So king h1 was played, rook g6 nevertheless. White thought that okay, there is nothing now on the, I will just play even. So he played the move g takes h3, that hoping that there is no mate, but there is of course a checkmate. I think you can pause the video and figure out how would it be a checkmate. It's black to play and win. Yeah, it's simple corner mate, or is there another name to it that I had given? I think it's corner mate. So queen g1, rook, yeah, it's corner mate. So queen g1 check is forcing the corner mate. The rook takes g1 is met with knight takes f2, which is a nice checkmate. So you can see the handling of the black with the isolated queen pawn in this particular game. You can go through these moves slowly and check out yourself, because I want to provide you with more data to analyze, and you can check these games on your own, since that's why I'm just going through entire games, since that's the point of creating this series, that to give you the opening ideas and also to discuss the typical attacking themes in those openings. So yeah, you can definitely check it out. There was one more variation that I wanted to cover. Let's see if I have a short game on it, because that's another possibility. I think this is a good game, also in the different system. Yeah, let's look at this game. This features another sideline. So d4 knight f6, c4 e6, knight c3, bishop b4, and now after queen c2 we have seen the move castles, and we have discussed in detail. Like after castles we have seen e4, we have seen a3, we have seen e3. These are all the moves we have seen. So in this game knight c6 was played. This is another tricky line that I wanted to mention in this particular video. Hits the pawn on d4, so white plays knight f3, d5 immediately, and after a3 we get the same structure again with wonderful knight on e4. So queen c2, and black goes for the break immediately with the move e5. So d takes e5, of course this free pawn was captured, and now bishop f5. And now you will see it's all about the piece activity in the Nimzo-Indian. So already there is a threat like knight g3 which will win the exchange. So queen a4 was played, castle, and bishop to e3, d4, and after rook to d1, this is what white was hoping for, that he could create a pressure on this pawn on d4 but black of course had different intention. He just sacrifices a queen here. You can see that tremendous piece activity allows black to go for such decisions. After rook d8, ef2 check, king d1, rook f takes d8, and after king c1 he continues with a6, and now the attack is very slow. He plays the move knight c5. He just wants to play knight a5, knight b3 check, and checkmate his king, because you can see this bishop is going to take a long time to get into the game. This knight is currently dominated. This rook of course has no future. So after queen c3, knight a5, now he just wants to play knight b3, and that's what happened in the game. So he tried e4, tried to complicate it, but it's just checkmate. Knight b3 was played, and here white resigned, because after king c2 there will follow bishop takes e4, and yeah, it's just a massacre of the king. Like, if the king goes to here, in fact you have to play only bishop d3, and after rook take d3, I think I just don't want to look at this position, because after queen d3 there are so many moves that just win on the spot. Bishop takes d3 is the strongest. You can even queen and win the rook as well. There are just a lot of ways to win. And as well, knight a to b3 check. If you go king b1, then it's a well-known checkmate with the move rook to a1. You can type in the comments the name of this checkmate pattern. We know the name, of course. So we have tried to cover the big chapter on the queen c2 Nimzo-Indian. There are a lot of games happening, I think, every day, since that Magnus chess tour is also going on. Number of games happen in this line. This is the most topical line that is there in the Nimzo-Indian. So you can definitely prepare it. I hope you like these examples, and we'll meet in the next video now. Till then, take care, and yeah, bye bye.